Alright, so for our next assignment, you're going to be getting a startup file, and the startup file is going to be called BallOnTrack_setup. So you're going to make a new project window, hit the new button, BallOnTrack, make sure it goes into your work folder, and then just copy this file into your scenes folder. Okay? So the way this is set up is if I hit play, obviously nothing's going to happen because this is the startup file. There's no animation to it. But you're going to be animating this ball hitting here, rolling down the track, hitting here, rolling down the track, hitting here, rolling down the track, hitting there, rolling down the track, hitting here, slowly coming to a stop right at the edge, and then doing the little half pipe deal and then coming up. Okay? Now just to show you just a way that this animation, we can kind of get some reference for what it could look like. I'm going to go to some dynamic stuff. You don't have to worry about what I'm doing here. But if I were to hit play now, the ball is going to be automatically animated. Okay, you're not doing this. I'm just showing you, just so you can get an idea of what would actually be happening. So you see how the ball is rolling as it's moving. It's going to come here. It bounces a little bit. Bounces. Bounces. Comes here. And it's basically stopped there. Okay. Now of course we can get this thing to move more. I can just add some stuff to this. This is called dynamic animation, and it's different than what we're doing because we are doing keyframed animation because we want to have more control over it. Okay, it broke, and that's the problem with dynamics, that sometimes it'll just break. So we're gonna ignore it. Whatever. I don't know why it does that, but sometimes it just breaks, and then we're kind of screwed. Alright, so essentially you saw the ball come down, and it ideally it went slower here, picked up a little bit of speed on this one, picked up a little bit more speed, picked up a lot of speed, and then here we should be able to get that bounciness and the rolling down there. Now physically it's impossible for this ball to roll down this hill and then come up and go higher than where it started. Okay, just like when we did the bouncing ball, it's impossible for a bouncing ball to bounce higher than the first bounce because it just wouldn't happen, because gravity and physics take over and it just does not happen. Alright, so let's get started with this. The first thing we want to do is figure out which directions we're going to be moving in. Now unlike the bouncing ball where we were just dealing with the Y direction first, and then we dealt with the X direction, and then we dealt with rotation, and then we dealt with squashing. Okay, in this case we're going to ignore squashing. Okay, at this stage it's still a little early to be getting into this with some squash because it can be very tricky to get it to look right. So we're going to go through and we're going to use the Y direction and the X direction in this case. Okay, if for some reason you shouldn't have it, but if for some reason yours was the Y and the Z, then you'd be focusing on Y and Z. Okay, but Y and X is the one I'm going to start with. So I'm going to do the little animation setup. So I'm going to grab these two things here. Go to animate. Before I do that, let me go next to my key and go to my preferences and just make sure I'm at 30 frames per second. There we go. Make sure my time slider is set to play every frame, real time, and then just reset my graph. Now I did about 500 frames here. It may be more, it may be less. Most likely it's going to be less. If you're in 500 frames, you're a little bit too realistic for what we need. Okay, possibly. Just because you have 500 frames doesn't mean it's going to be realistic looking. Alright, so we have these two guys selected because I want to set my first key at frame 1. I go to Animate, Set Key Option Box, All Keyable from Channel Box, Set Key. Okay, so now when we hit S, while those are highlighted, we'll set a key on those. So here's the tricky part, is how long is it going to take for this ball to hit here? Okay, Well, we just guess. So I'm going to go up maybe 15 frames. And then I'll set it there. And I use the front view a lot because this is basically like a dead-on shot, and then I can move it like this and not have to worry about grabbing the Z direction on accident. Because that will screw you up if you start messing with stuff that you're not supposed to be touching yet. Okay, so I'm just going to move it in the Y. I'm going to hit S to set a key. And then how long now does it take to get to the end of this ramp? Again, we just guess. If it took 15 frames to get down, maybe it takes 30 frames to get to the end of the ramp. We'll just round it off to 35. Okay, so now I'm going to move both of these, and I'm going to move it to the very edge of the ramp, like that. Okay, the spot right before it would fall off. I hit S again. So now I'm going to do this throughout, is just go back to frame 1, hit play, and see if I'm liking how it's moving. Now you can see how it's dipping below the surface there. Well, it's dipping below because if I look at my graph, I'll look at my graph for the Y direction here, you can see how it's not going straight, it's like dipping down. And the same thing with my X is that it's rounded, okay? So if I simply go through and grab these and make it linear, okay, so just grab the graphs, hit linear, rewind it, hit play, you see it doesn't dip below, alright? So what I'm looking for at this stage is consistent movement. What I don't want, well, I'll show you what I don't want after we get further into this. Alright, so let me grab those again. Okay, again, how far from here to there? Let's say, let's see, that was 50. Let's say we go to 65. And then I'm going to give this, I don't want it to go straight. Okay, it wouldn't go straight. It would kind of like come in and then fall downward. So maybe something like that. Okay, it really depends on how heavy the ball is and how fast it's moving is going to be the dictator for how far away this is going to go. If you're dealing with the bowling ball is going to roll really, really slow, really, really slow. Once it gets to the edge, it's basically going to fall straight down. Okay, if you're dealing with a super bouncy ball, that thing is going to roll slow at first and then pick up speed, and then it's going to bounce here, may bounce back, bounce here, more like the animation we saw when we made it dynamic. Alright, so if it took, let's see, 35 frames from here to there, how many frames is it going to take to get down there? Okay, now we're going to add a bounce to this, so I'm going to actually go up a few frames, like 5 frames, and set another key. Okay, that way I have a little bit of room for my bounce to happen. Okay, so then we're going to go and figure out from here, if it took 35 frames for the first ramp, this ramp's a bit steeper, it's going to go a bit quicker, so maybe it only takes 30. So I'll go to 30 and bring this to the end. And then we'll figure if the other one took 15, maybe this one only takes 12. Okay. As I'm figuring out these numbers, I'm also trying to think down here what it's going to be. Okay. And if I'm lessening each time, then I have to make sure that I allow enough time each time for that stuff to happen. So now let's go back to the beginning and hit play. Okay, and we did see that it did go a little bit quicker. You can see the speed here. The speed there is a bit quicker, but it looked consistent. Okay, we don't have something like this happening. I'm just going to really mess this up just so you can see what I don't want. Okay, it falls down. Suddenly it goes super slow. It goes fast. And then suddenly it zips really quick right here. Somehow it picks up speed going down this ramp and then jumping across. Okay, that's what we don't want. So at this stage, all we're doing is looking for consistent speed that makes sense. Alright, so then we're just going to keep going. Okay, if it took 30 frames for it to get down here, how many is it going to take for this? Let's go to 112, and we'll just say maybe 25 or 27. So 27 plus 112 would be 39. So 139. It gets to the edge of this. There we go. And I set another key. And then let's say another 10 frames. We're down here. And I'm going to realize that I made a mistake. I did that on purpose just so you can see how I have to fix this. Okay, I have it come here and hit, but I never set my extra keyframes for me to add those in there. Okay, so I'm going to go back to here to 112. I'm using my little clickers here on the right. I'm going to middle mouse button click to, let's say, 117. I'm going to reset my key, and now because I've reset my key here, this next part is going to go faster than I wanted it to. Okay, because now I have less frames between here and there. So I'm just going to hold shift, middle mouse button drag, and I get this thing with an arrow here. It's hard to see, but there's an arrow there, and there's two arrows in the middle. The arrows in the middle are for moving, the arrows on the outside are for scaling. So if I grab this, it's going to scale them. Okay, so I'm just going to move this down about 5 frames. It doesn't have to be exact. And now we should be good. Okay, I'm hit play just to see where we're at. Alright, that's looking good. Alright, so again we'll go up a few frames, set a key just so we have some room for the bounce. I think I want to set a longer key there. There we go. If you don't set enough there, it's going to look funny. And then how many did we have here? 117 to 145. That's about 28. So then we'll go here. Maybe we'll say 24. Okay, so 2487. If you need to grab a calculator, grab a calculator. But I found that if you just attempt to do the math in your head, eventually the math in your head becomes easier to do. And then just figure that out. Okay, it gets down here. Make sure it touches the bottom. I'm setting a key. And I'm not going to set an extra bounce one here because it's going to basically bounce in the same direction I need it to go anyway. So now we'll go up to maybe let's say 240. I'm going to bring it right to the edge and set a key. Alright, oops, I want to switch views. Alright, so now let's look at this and just see how this is looking. I'm just going to jump back to the graph editor, make sure everything's linear. Okay, it looks like it's going kind of quick there, so I'm just actually going to scoot this keyframe down a little bit. All right, let's try that again. Okay, we can work with that. Okay, so what's going to happen here is eventually this is going to stop, and then it's going to roll over the edge. Right-clicked. It's going to roll over the edge and then go down the ramp and then come up and do whatever. I've had people in the past have this thing come up, and then it slides on, it lands on another platform like this, and it rolls down, and it starts back over. Obviously, you don't do the starting back over, but it would go back to the beginning, indicating that, yes, this probably starts back over. Okay, so now I have this rolling here. So now we're going to have it jump down the ramp. So what we're going to do is we take it here at 260, and I'm going to go up to maybe, say, 15 frames. And I'm going to have it round the corner here and set a key. Oops. Make sure I set a key just on those two. So now I have it kind of coming here. It's going to stop. I'll eventually get it to stop using the graph editor. and then it'll roll. Okay. So I'm actually going to go in the middle also and pull this out and set another key. Okay, so now it's going to do something like this, and the rest of that work I can kind of get in the graph editor just tweaking stuff. Okay, so now that we have that, I'm going to go, and this is might seem a little bit tricky to do, but if it took 2 seconds for it to go here, maybe it takes 3 seconds to go there. We'll just see how the timing is. So it's 270 plus 90 is 266, or 366. I'm going to scoot this on the other side. Again, make sure it's touching. Set a key. Okay. So now let's just see how this looks. Okay. Obviously it goes straight across. So what I'm going to do is figure out where it is in the middle. About here it's in the middle of my ramp. Then I can just move it down and set another key. Okay, it's very important that you set these things up in the right spots. Okay, if this is up here and I'm trying to play with my graph, play with the graph to get it to work correctly, it's not going to. So I really have to make sure that I set this thing in the correct spot and all my keyframes are in the exact spot I need them to be. Okay, so now let's go back and hit play. Okay, it rolls to a stop. Okay, that's about what I expected. Maybe we can get this a little bit quicker, so I can just move some of these keyframes. Alright, that's acceptable. Again, we can play with these things, and play with these things, and play with these things until we get something we're super duper happy with. Alright, so, and then at the end of this, let's say 380, I'm just going to pull this straight up and set a key. So it comes in, rolls down the hill, and goes up. And something happens at that point. One of them, I think one of the better ones, someone did like a mouse trap thing. So it came here, it flew up and hit this thing, and then that caused this little cage thing to fall onto a mouse. You don't have to do anything crazy like that, but it was just a cool idea. Okay, so the easy part is over. Okay, the easy part is just kind of laying out where these things are going to happen. We can use the graph editor to play with our keys if we need to. We can also use the dope sheet. I'm going to show the dope sheet because it is a cool tool, and some of you I've probably already shown. But this basically lays out where your keys are at. Okay, so if we decide that we want to change the spacing of some of our keys, we can do it very quickly in here. So if I come into here and I say I just don't like the timing of these 3 keys, I want this keyframe here, here, and here. You know, this one, and that one to be together closer. All I have to do is grab the ones here and then just middle drag. And I'm just changing their timing. I'm not changing their value. If I'm in the graph editor and I start grabbing keys in here, it's easy for me to accidentally move the values of the keys, therefore screwing up where it's landing on my page. Okay. So in the dope sheet, it's very easy. I just grab these and just middle drag, marquee them with the left mouse, and then middle drag with the middle mouse. There we go. Okay, so you may see me jump into the dope sheet and play with some stuff there. So now back to the front view. There we go. Alright, so what should happen here? The ball comes down. Let's look at our graph and see. Okay, translate X. At this point, there's no translate X movement. It's not moving in this direction from here to there. Okay? It is moving in Y though. And there's the Y. Now it shouldn't start at a constant speed. Right now it's starting at a constant speed. That's why it's linear. That's what linear does. Okay? So I'm going to take all of these right now and just make, I moved it, make all of these spline, which is that one right there. Okay? And it's going to do the funky thing. zipping through and doing whatever. That's fine. I'm going to let it do the weird thing where it dips in. We'll fix it. I'm going to go back to my translate Y. I'm going to start at the first key and we'll work our way around. The first key, if we think about it, if I were to just drop a ball, it would start off at 0 in my hand, and then as I open my hand, it would gradually pick up speed. So that's what we need to show here, is that it's starting at 0, so I flatten it. Oops, flatten it. It's starting at 0 and gradually picking up speed. So now if we look at this, we're not going to see anything huge, but it is. Okay. Now I noticed that in the X direction, it's kind of like rounding off. So let me go back to my X, and I can see in here that it's dipping down below this. Okay. So I may have been a little bit jumpy on setting it to spline. So I'm going to set it to this other one, which is clamped. Okay. And what clamped does is it gets rid of those little dips. Okay. Spline tries to keep a nice fluid motion, where clamped is going to say, okay, I'm not going to let you go below that value. Alright, so I'll set it to clamped. That's probably a better one. Alright, so now we'll go back to this, set this one to flat on the Y. And there we go. Okay, now we don't really see it too much, but it is starting off slow and picking up speed. Okay, so maybe right off the bat, this is like way too quick. Okay, so let's go to the graph editor. Not the graph editor, the dope sheet. I'm going to look at all my keys here, and I'm going to grab all my keyframes. You have to make sure you grab them all. If I miss one, it's going to mess things up. And I'm just going to middle drag to scoot things down a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to give it a full second. Here's 30 frames, that line right there. I'm going to give it a full second to fall. There we go. That seems a bit more natural coming down. Okay, good. So now we'll go to the next keyframe, which is right here. If we look at this, it's gradually going into that next Y position. Okay, it's slowly going into this. It shouldn't slowly go into it. It doesn't know that the platform is there. It should be an abrupt change that it does. Okay, so I'm going to go to frame 30, and I'm going to grab this tangent here and make this linear. Okay, so that means that it's basically slowly moving, and it's going to hit. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the X, which I don't have to do because it's already there. Okay, so now it's good. Now also notice that I forgot to add the little bump here. So again, I'm going to go through, and I'm going to do it down here instead of the dope sheet, just because I can do it without having to jump into something. Just scooting some frames down, adding some time for my bump. Making sure I go to 30 and then middle click, and then set a key. There we go. Okay, and you'll notice this time that after I added that key, it's no longer going under it, it's going above it now, which is fine, it'll do that. Alright, so I'm going to ignore this for right now, the little bumps. We'll come back and adjust the bumps. Okay, but I want to focus on just the rolling portion. Alright, so let's go here, let's go to the Y. I want to look at both, and in the Y I can see we get this. Okay, and it should basically, it stops, it bounces, that's what it's going to do there, and then it's going to slowly start moving and then pick up speed. Okay, what's happening though is that the Y and the X are not in sync. Okay, if I made them linear, they would be in sync, it would match up perfectly, but we can't have that because we want to have this transition. So if I grab the Y and I grab this handle and I start adjusting it, I can get it to lay back on this thing. Okay, but I want to do it from an area that makes more sense. So I'm going to do it from the next keyframe. Okay, I'm going to do it from this side here, this keyframe's handle. So I'm just going to tweak it a little bit to get it to lay down. And I'm going to go back and say that looks pretty good. We may need to adjust it a little bit here. Okay, we are dipping a little bit below. Okay, it doesn't need to ride 100% on there, but we want to get it pretty close. There we go. There we go. That's acceptable right there. Okay. So now we'll follow this along. It's going to hit. Okay, now when it hits, it should be a surprise. So we grab this handle. Right when it hits something, and we change that one handle to linear. Go to the X, do the same thing. Grab the one handle, make it linear. Okay, it's the same thing we're doing on the bouncing ball, except on this one, we're on a ramp. It's the same exact thing. There's our bounce, and then at 117, this next keyframe, we should have the same thing. It starts off slow, which it does, and then it picks up speed. Let's go to the Y and make sure it's doing the same thing. Yep, it is. Okay, so now we're going to have to play with this a little bit, so let's go and click and drag. And we see that again, it's going over it. Not a big deal. We'll go to the next keyframe, and we'll tweak the Y positioning. And some of these you might think this is impossible. There's no way I'm ever going to get this thing to work. You will. It just might be playing with it until you're mentally insane. Alright, so here's my next hit. Make it linear. There's the next hit. Grab the handle, make it linear. Okay, and we always want to go back and just make sure everything's looking nice and smooth. Okay, then we'll go down to the next one. We have our nice smooth transition. That was just us going to spline, so we don't have to worry about that. Obviously we're floating, and I always go to the Y because I think the Y one is usually the culprit. And we just tweak that Y, and we're good. See, no problem there. And then it hits. So right there where it hits, I need to make that linear. This hits, make it linear. There we go. We're going off track again, so we go back to the Y. We go to the following keyframe, and we just tweak it until we're back on there. There we go. Okay, and again it hits the ground, so we should have linear. Okay. Now here it's going to be a little bit tricky because we have some momentum from us rolling down that we're not going to be going from a flat position. Like I don't want to grab this and make it flat because then it's going to look like it's stopping and then it's gradually picking up speed. I don't want that. What I want it to do is look like it has some speed coming down and then it hits and then it gradually loses speed on here. So for this handle, I'm going to leave it at clamped for now, not spline, clamped. But this next one that's over here, this one, where this is the one where it's at the edge, I'm going to make that one flat. Okay, so what should happen is it comes down, okay, and then it gradually comes to a stop. Okay, I think I want to add more space there, so I'm just going to marquee these points and just scoot them down. Alright, and I'm going to emphasize this a little bit more. Okay, I really want this to get to a stopping point a lot sooner, or look like it's slowing down a lot sooner. I could go into here and grab this and tweak it, but I don't want to mess up what I already have here. Okay, so I can take these handlebars and like in Illustrator and Photoshop, we can stretch them out. Well, it's not letting me stretch this one. So one thing I'm going to do is grab this and break the tangents. So I'm going to go up here to this icon that says break tangents and break the tangents. Now I can move this independently. Then I'm going to go up to curves and say weighted tangents. Okay, now that'll change it on the entire curve, make the entire curve weighted. Then under tangents for this one, I'm going to say free tangent weight. So now I get open handlebars, so I can grab this, hold down shift, and middle drag. Okay. And you can see that that's pulling that bar out a bit more. So now let's see where we're at. Okay, it actually looks like it picks up speed. Okay, so I think I may have to tweak this one a little bit. Okay, I want to get a nice, good rounding right here. Okay, I still may have just not enough frames between these. I'm just going to keep scooting this over. There we go. That feels more natural. It feels like it's kind of coming off that cliff or that ramp. Well, that looks a little slow here. We watch the speed of this. That looks a little slow, so let me just nudge this. And I have to make sure I grab everything, otherwise I'm going to start affecting other stuff. Okay? If I want just this area to go, just this area right here to go quicker, I have to grab all the stuff here and move it. Because if I just grab this one keyframe and move it, then I'm going to increase the distance between these 2 points. Okay? And it's coming down. There we go. Okay. So now, let me just set this last part up, and then we'll do a little preview. Okay. Now it's a little wobbly right here. That's fine. We'll deal with that later. Let's deal with it now. It's going to bother me. Okay. So we look at this. Let's look at the X direction first. I'm going to go to the next X keyframe, which is right there. That's good. Go to the next X keyframe. That's good. But if you look here, we go above it. I don't know why we're going above it there. Maybe the clamp is doing something funny. So I'm just going to make this flat. Okay, so now I have a nice rounding right there. So now we come here. Okay, now I'm going to try to round this off. So I have to just play with my handlebars until I can get it round. So I'm going to, let's see, I want to keep that there. Okay, I think I might get rid of this keyframe. I'm just looking at this one area right here. So I think I can work with that. I deleted the Y keyframe because it looked like it was just moving it down too far. So if I go to the middle area of this, I'm going to break the tangent of this one because I don't want to mess up what I have here. And I'm just going to play with this bar. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to break this tangent. Just adjust this bar until it looks a bit more natural. I think it's as far as I want to take the Y direction. Let me go to the X and see what I can do on the X side. Okay. Now remember, the X is just moving it left and right. The Y is moving it up and down. Okay, I think this keyframe here might even be a little bit too far out. There we go. So I'm just moving that keyframe. There we go. So now you can see how it wraps around this thing. Okay, now when we have rolling, it'll look much better. Alright, that's cool. Alright, now here's the tricky part of this, is getting this thing to work correctly. Your natural instinct is to, okay, we're right here, let's just move this over and set a key. Okay? And then we'll do the same thing on the other side, come here, move this over, set a key. And what ends up happening is you don't really have a whole lot of control over it in the graph editor. Alright? The graph editor is going to be your friend. You just have to trust that that is going to happen, and you just have to keep playing with it until you do. So what should this look like? Well, if we broke this down into just the pieces, I'm going to open up Photoshop and then show you a little something. Okay. Hide that. So we have this half pipe. Excuse my mouse drawing. And if we look at the y direction, okay, in this area here, ish, and this area here, ish, this is going to be dominated by a lot of y movement. Okay, there's a lot of vertical up and down movement. In this area, we have a lot of x movement. Okay, so what we have to do is get that across inside of our graph editor that we want a lot of y here, a lot of y here, a lot of x here, a lot of y there. And you can see that the y in this direction, if we just looked at the y, is not going to be very substantial. Okay? If I were to create a graph of what this is going to look like, the y in this area should be, let me draw it in green, should be kind of like this. Oops, not like that. Kind of like this, and then dripping down. Okay? And then when it gets to that reddish area, the y is going to flatten out some. Okay? Because it's not really going to move a whole lot. And then when it gets here, it's going to jump back up some more. Okay? This is just the y. Oops. And that's going to go kind of like that. Okay? So it's going to basically slow here, pick up some speed, slow down, not a lot of y movement, and then we're going to get a lot of y movement. Okay? The x is going to be basically the opposite. We're going to have a very little bit of x movement. We're going to have some. It's going to be very slight. And then we're going to have a lot of x, and then very, very slight. Okay? So that's basically what the x is going to be doing. If this was like this, that means the x is going at a constant speed, but you can see from this that we have a speed variation. You can see that the y has some variation to it too. Okay? So let's jump back to Maya and try to get that across. So we'll first start off with our y direction. Usually the y gives you the most influence in here. You can basically see the y is doing essentially what we had before. Here's our graph, like that, and it's basically doing that in here. But I want to take this keyframe, and I don't really want to make it flat, because if you look at where this graph is coming in, suddenly it like stops and then goes, and it shouldn't. So I'm just going to tweak this until it looks pretty smooth with what we have there. Okay, so we're basically keeping the same speed and then going into this thing. Okay, down here we have the same thing, and in this we have a lot of y. So down here we have very little y movement, over here we have a lot of y movement. So I can tweak this like that, and I can tweak this to a point. I just want to make sure that I'm careful with it so I don't screw up the other stuff. Okay, so you can see right now we're moving way too much in the y right there. Alright, so I do have to move this down. But I think a lot of that's going to come from the x too. So I'll leave that area alone for now. Okay, and you can see here the y, maybe we're just not hitting the y, or we're hitting the y a little bit too much. There we go. So you can see I basically sort of kind of have that other side pretty much done. Okay, so let's go back to the x and we'll play with the x. Okay, we're going to do the same thing here on the x. We should have some subtle x movements, so let me break the tangents. Okay, we got way too much x movement there. Let's go back to that last keyframe just to make sure we're good. We are good there. And I think what I want to do is I'm going to take this tangent and make it free tangent weight and then just pull this in. Okay, and it's going like that, so that's fine. We'll just adjust it. Where does it want to go? There we go. I'm just really going to pull this out. want to pull it too much, because it's going to look funky. I'm going to go back to the Y. I have to adjust the Y some too. I may have to end up tweaking this other curve too, just so I can get a nice smooth motion. Okay, I'm going to make this one here a free tangent weight. Oops, I have to make it weighted first, and then make it a free tangent weight. There we go. Alright, now I can come back to the X, play with the X. It's going to be a constant back and forth with these to get it to look correctly. So now I can take this and adjust it slightly. Okay, I'm probably dipping a little bit too low right there. Let's take this Y in a little bit. Let's take this one and do a little weighted on this. I adjust that in the X. Okay, and just trust me on this, you will eventually get this. Okay? I've taught this exact assignment for several years, and everyone has been able to get it. It's just a matter of continuously playing with it. That's all it's going to be. And even though I had a little bit of despair when I first started doing this, eventually you get it. Eventually it just kind of clicks and everything starts working correctly. Just getting to that point is a bit tricky. So I'm going to play with my Y again. And you just have to remember that the Y is moving it up. Okay? Oops, not that side. And sometimes like I can't click on just the one handle and bring it in, so I'm going to break it just so I can tweak the one side. Okay? Just a slight tweak. And you also have to remember that you're adjusting not just what you're looking at, but other stuff too. Alright, and there I got it. Not terribly bad, so that's good. Okay? And just so you can see what my graph is going to look like, here's the X graph. Okay, we're moving vertically, we're moving down. Then move down our first ramp. We go backwards and move down the second ramp. We go the other way, move down the other ramp. And then we're moving just straight, and then we go through the loop, and there we go. In the Y, we're doing the same thing. We're moving, falling down first, moving down the first ramp, moving down the second ramp, the third ramp, the fourth ramp, going along that platform, and then dipping down. Now you can see here too, here's my first ramp. It's pretty shallow. Here's this one, it's kind of deep. Here's this one, whoa, don't move your keys. Here's this one, it's a bit deeper, and here's this one, it's a bit deeper. So we're getting a bit quicker each time, which is what we want. Alright, so now let's do a little preview of this just to see what it's going to look like. So I'm going to turn my grid off because that's kind of annoying to see. I'm going to deselect. Actually, maybe I'll just select it and I'd like deselect. Alright, so we'll keep it like that. I'm going to right click down here and go to Play Blast option box. I'm going to set this to image, set my encoding to Maya, go to scale, set it to 1, and then hit Play Blast. And what this is going to do is zip through your frames and then write them all out to a quick sequence that we can see in real time. So we'll just wait 3 seconds and then it'll be done. And you can see mine took about 500 frames or so, 470, 460. And now it's going to load when it decides to. Alright, here it is. And the first time it plays is probably going to play back in kind of like a loading phase, and then it'll play back in real time. Okay, the first time it may play back in real time, we just can't really see it. So now the second time should be real time for sure, so then we can look at this and see if we're really liking what's happening. I don't really care for, there's a little bit of a hiccup here. It looks like it goes a little bit too quick right there, so I'll have to fix that. And then it looks like it's a little bit too quick here, right at this drop. Okay, so I'm going to go back and tweak this. Okay, just using the graph editor and just using those same tips and techniques that we were using before. Okay, I don't want you to see every single step because I want you to actually have to kind of figure some of the stuff out for yourself. Okay, so give me a few minutes. I'll be ready. Here we are at the second go. I like that transition better. I like that transition better too. Okay, some of these things you may not really be able to see in the lecture too good, just because the lecture is at a certain frames per second, and I'm watching this at a different frame per second, but trust me that it looks good. Okay, so now the next step of this is going to be going through and adding in those bounces. Okay, now I'm going to do just one of the bounces, and then you can play with the other ones to get the other ones to look good. All right, so essentially what I'm doing is I'm going to those in-between frames that we have basically this thing paused. And I'm just going to lift the ball up a little bit. You don't want to lift it up too high, just a little bit. And then I'm just going to set a key on my X and Y. Okay. Now it's going to look funny until we tweak it a little bit. So I'm going to go in the graph editor, not that, graph editor. I'm going to zoom in on this area. Come on. There we go. And I can see that I didn't have it really centered the way I wanted it to, so I'll center it better. Okay, and again we should have this one here should be linear. This one there should also be linear. Okay, nothing really happening in the X direction right now. Okay, now I am going to nudge it a little bit forward in the X, so I'm going to actually delete the following key. Let's see what happens when I delete that. That way when it hits, we can get it to start moving a little bit. Just gotta make sure that it doesn't start floating again or dipping down. There we go. And I might want to add a little bit more time between those. So I can go to not the track editor, go to my dope sheet. Making sure I grab them all. Move tool, middle mouse button drag. And grab that, middle mouse button drag. Now let's see if that totally messes up. Nope, that looks good. I'll do the same thing there. Everything else should look pretty much the same because we really haven't tweaked anything. We've just kind of shuffled some things around. Yep, everything else is good. Okay, so then I would just go to the next one and do the same thing. Just add that little bump in. There we go, that looks good. Okay, and then the next step after this would be rotation. Okay, I'm going to do the first 2 ramps of rotation, and then you're on the rotation for the rest of it. Actually, I'll do the rotation for the last 2 ramps. Okay, so we're going here, and I'm going to pretend that I already had stuff set up in the rotate Z, because I think that's the direction. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to set a key on the rotate Z. Make sure I'm at one of the keyframes. You want to make sure you're at the actual keyframe where you're going to start moving this thing. So right there, I'm going to set a key. And then I'm going to go to where it would be changing directions, right here. Okay? It will be rolling in the same direction until it gets here. And then I'll rotate it a few times, set another key. Okay, so now if I rewind and hit play, I can see that the ball looks like it's actually rolling. And it hits. At 214, I'm going to set another key. That's where I want to start rolling again. I'll go to where I want this to stop rolling, which in this case should be right here. And then I'll rotate it the other way. And this one isn't rolling very much because I didn't really give it a lot of rotation. It needs a lot more. It moves a lot further, so I need to have a lot more rotations on there. There we go. That's pretty much perfect. Okay, I only like how it slides down here. I mean, I don't mind it because in the real world it wouldn't just start rolling right away. It would actually slide a little bit. Let's go in the graph editor and see what it's doing. So we'll go to the rotate Z. And your rotate Z should be basically like a ping-ponging effect. Okay. Up here it's going to rotate one way. And then down here it's going to rotate another way. And then right here it's going to rotate back the same way as this one. And then here it's going to rotate back the same way as that one. Alright, so there we go. We're starting off slow, we're picking up speed, and then getting there. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. The only way I could get more rotations, I could tweak the graph, of course. But I could just go through and just add some more rotation here and reset my key. And that'll give me a little bit more rotation sooner. The biggest thing you have to be concerned about is that you have too much rotation. Okay, so I rotated it like that, which is way too much. And so now when we get to this one spot, the ball is spinning like crazy and it's not moving like crazy. Okay, it's like spinning way too fast for its movement. So you just have to be careful that you don't do that. So it looks like the ball's movement is actually the ball rolling on the ground. Okay, and then again, at this point, I probably have a couple more rotations going in that same direction. There we go. Okay. Oops. So you don't need to add the squash, but you do need to add the rest of the rotations. Let me flatten out this, both of these actually, I think. Let's get there, yes. Both of those should be flat. And rolly, cool. And I don't need that one to be flat, that can be linear. Alright, so there we go. So that's basically it, minus the extra bumps that we put in, minus the extra rolling. Okay? So your end product is going to be from a perspective view. Okay, we're not doing a crazy camera angle, just like before. We want to keep this simple. I'm going to set up my render view. I'm going to go to my camera and select it, or we can make a new camera. That'd probably be better. Make a new camera. Then click the ball. Then go back up here. Now you don't want to be right on top of the ball like this, because then it's hard to see the rest of the stuff happening. We want to be able to anticipate what's going to happen, so we want to be a little bit further back like that. Okay, not like this, because then it's hard to see again. I'm going to find that sweet spot. Okay, and I like to actually show, the next ramp coming up too, so we have just a little bit more anticipation. We can adjust our focal length like we did before. Okay, I'm going to hit S to set a key here. Wait until it falls down, about there, and then move down to the next ramp and set a key. Okay, And of course, I'm only setting a key on the focal length because I'm not paying attention. Let's grab all these, translates and rotates, set a key, go back to the beginning, set a key. Okay, I want to make sure I don't hit this too much, so I'm gonna. Yep, I think I'm going too fast. Let me delete this key here. I'm going to scoot that key down a little bit. Alright, let's go back here. Let's set a key there. That's good. I like that. Again, go down here, set a key. I want to be able to see these things gliding along the edge. I don't want to be down here because then I can't see it. I don't want to be up there, obviously. Go down a little bit. That's the hard part, is that we move this frame, then we got to figure out, where's the ball at. There it is. More like that. So we're losing it here, so let's scoot it down. That's not going to help us much. Let's delete that key. Let's go right here where it hits, and then come down. And I think at this point, I want to start actually zooming back too. Alright, that works. Alright, so now we'll do a little preview. Right click, play blast. I already set the stuff up, so I don't need to set it up again. Play blast, and I'll be back when it's... Alright, so here it is. Remember, I don't have the extra bounces in there or the extra rolling at the beginning. What I'm looking for with the camera move is just a nice, smooth camera move. That's it. I was able to nail it pretty much right on the first one. I'm just going to look at the graph editor because I always like to look at it just to see what we're doing. And with this, because we're moving so many different things, I can delete the focal length keyframe. So many different things in here that I want to just click on each one individually and just look at it and just see if I'm liking what's happening with each one. I'm making sure that this isn't, let's say these are all flat. Okay, if I grab all of these and make every single one of these flat like this, you'll see what's going to happen to the camera. And you can see how the speed of the camera is changing. It's like going slow, fast, slow, fast, slow, fast. That's not something you want. Okay, so with this thing, it clamped. It actually worked out good. It looks like it turned out to be a good graph. Okay, all my graphs look pretty good. This one, I could probably set this to spline, just to keep that nice and smooth. This one's not moving, so I can just delete it. My rotate X is moving a little bit. That's good, that's good. That's good there, too. Okay, so let me preview it again. Okay, rolly, bouncy, rolly, bouncy, rolly, bouncy, rolly. There we go. Cool. That's it. Alright, so now you're going to texture the stuff. Remember the last one we did? We wanted to texture it so that it would look like it's rolling, because if I just click my wireframe off and I hit play, I can't see that it's rolling. Okay, so that doesn't help us out at all. So we want to add a texture to this that's going to make it look like it's rolling. So I'm just going to, just for fun, add a Mia. You don't have to do Mias, you can still do blends, but remember the point of adding Mias and adding high-end rendering stuff is that it makes it look high-end, it makes it look better. I'm going to just do Chrome on this, but what I'm going to do different is I'm going to add a texture. I'm going to go to the reflectivity and map to the reflectivity here a ramp. And this ramp is going to be a none ramp. Now I'm just going to make that white. Make this white. And make that black. Okay. So now if I were to look at that, it's not going to show me anything right here. But if I went to mental ray and I hit the render button, and it's a little bit difficult to see because there's nothing to reflect, right? So why would there be anything reflecting in there? Because there's nothing to reflect. So we'll go through, and I can even add in, under my indirect lighting tab, I can go to image-based lighting. And I've added in this marble-free HDRI that I found. It's basically, this is just a picture, come on, of a city. And I just rotate this around so that it kind of makes more sense. There we go. And I can go to the attribute editor under render stats for this thing and turn off primary visibility. That way I don't see it. Okay. I essentially just want to use this as a reflection tool. So now we'll render, and now we should see. Let me get closer to this. Here we have our reflection, and then we have no reflection right in the middle. Okay, and I can even play with some of the settings. Obviously, this looks like crazy reflective. I can take the glossiness samples up. Let's make it 16. Take the glossiness to 0.25. And that'll help to kind of disperse our chrome ball. And then I'll just take the color and even just make the color black. That way, instead of this gray band, I have this black band that'll go across it. There we go. Then the other thing we can do too is that this ball that we have here, let's pretend I wanted to add a higher res ball into this scene. Okay, so I can actually go and create a different ball. So I can make a new ball. There it is. And I just left this at the default setting. So if I shift click this, modify snap align objects option box, midpoints of X, Y, and Z, last selected object, my new ball should be right there. There it is. Apparently I didn't leave it at the right settings because it's a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to shrink it down until it fits the ball. There it is. Alright. So now this is render ball. I'm going to take my other ball, that's my animation ball. I'm going to drop him on a layer and just hide him for a minute. Okay, this is my render ball. And I'm just going to just do a little modeling on here. Oops. Alright, let me go here. Fine. Let's go to the front view and grab it. So I'm just going to extrude this, push it in, just grab these edges, and just throw a bevel on them. Okay, so now I just created that little thing right there. So now I'll put a Mia on this. Mia. Oh, there you are. I'll leave this as a dark Mia. A little bit of reflection in there, and then the rest of this, I'll do a different Mia, and I'll leave that as chrome, but with just a little bit of glossiness. Alright, so now let's take a look at this guy. Alright, so there it is. Obviously I'm going to tweak this a little bit more. This is just way too reflective still. I'm just going to take the glossiness down. Maybe take some of the reflectivity down on that. Just render a little section. And see how it's getting a little hazier. I don't want it to be so dispersed like it was the last time. Like that probably looks good there. Alright, so let's just do a full render. There it is. Okay, so now we have this ball like that. And just like before, I can go in and change stuff. Like instead of that gray band, I can make it like a red band. Alright, so there we go. So let's pretend that's our finished ball that we want to then animate or get the animation of our other ball. Okay, so what we can do is, I'm just going to, for ease of this, I'm going to freeze the transforms. I'm going to delete the history. There we go. So now he's in the exact same spot as the other one. Okay, and if I click on the other one, he's in the exact same starting point. So I'm going to use the outliner for this next step. So I want to take the render ball and I want it to follow the animation ball. Okay, so if I click on the animation ball, control click on the render ball in the outliner, and I go up to constrain parent option box, make sure that everything's clicked, maintain offset, translates, rotates, and add, and then I hide my animation ball by just turning the layer off. Now what's going to happen is my other ball will then animate with what the other one was doing. And there it is. Okay, so the constrained parent, what this allows me to do is just constrain it so that it follows it. That's all it's doing. It's basically like parenting it, but I can hide one and not hide the other. Okay, had I just parented them, it would have hid both when I turned the layer off. Alright, so we'll add lights to this, we'll add materials to these guys, to this thing, and then we'll go through and we'll render this out with good settings. Obviously we want to do the same settings we had, or similar settings than we had in the other one. So you can refer back to the bouncing ball video as to what the settings were. But essentially you're rendering out two of these. One of them is going to have motion blur, one of them is not going to have motion blur. So refer back to that video just so I don't say something a little bit different and then you're really confused. Okay, so that's it. That's going to be that assignment.